call it the window period. The window period. The window period. The window period. So when we are talking about the window period in hepatitis B viral infection, you should know, just as in HIV, we can also have window period in the hepatitis B infection. When we say window period means that your hepatitis B, the hepatitis B surface antigen is positive, all right, okay? It's positive, all right. But on serology, we are not going to see it as positive. It will be a false negative, okay? It means that you have hepatitis B surface antigen, okay, which is positive. Okay, it is there, all right. But should you do a serology, it will come out as negative. Why? Because for the hepatitis B surface antigen to show on the serology as positive, it will need to reach a particular threshold. If it does not reach that threshold, it will be considered insignificant and hence represented as negative. So what that means is that if you look at such a patient, the hepatitis B surface antigen, that is, I'm referring to the immunoglobulin G against hepatitis B surface antigen, that will be the antibody, definitely will be negative. It will be negative. And you are going to see immunoglobulin M against hepatitis B core antigen being positive. So what this tells you, as we remembered, that anytime hepatitis B core antigen, no, not hepatitis B core antigen, anytime the immunoglobulin against hepatitis B core antigen, that is I'm talking about the antibody, hepatitis B core antibody is positive, it tells you that the patient has had the hepatitis B infection before, whether currently or previously. So the moment you see this, it tells you that there has been a hepatitis B infection. There has been a hepatitis B infection. Okay? Now, but if you look upwards, the hepatitis B surface antigen is negative. And one indicator that you always look at to know whether the patient is cured or not is if the immunoglobulin G against hepatitis B surface antigen is also positive. If it is positive, then you know that, okay, the patient is cured from a previous hepatitis B infection. But here lies the case, the immunoglobulin G against hepatitis B surface antigen is negative. And the immunoglobulin M against hepatitis B core antigen is positive, telling you there has been an infection. But the moment the hepatitis B surface antibody is negative, then it tells you that the infection has not been cleared totally. There is still an infection, just that it has been suppressed. So anytime, you should know, it is only immunoglobulin G against hepatitis B surface antigen, that is the hepatitis B surface antibody, that can clear completely the hepatitis B surface antigen. It is only the hepatitis B surface antibody in the form of immunoglobulin G that can completely clear the hepatitis B surface antigen, nothing else. The immunoglobulin M, or in a case, immunoglobulin G against hepatitis B core antigen, that's the hepatitis B core antibodies, if present, can clear hepatitis B surface antigen, but not completely. They can only clear it to levels undetectable on serology. So when you have a scenario where, the reason why I'm saying that is because immunoglobulin M is an acute phase reactant, so it is immediately produced. Unlike immunoglobulin G, which takes 6 months. It takes 6 months to reproduce. Immunoglobulin G will take 6 months to reproduce. And as I told you, the hepatitis B surface antibody is in the form of what? Immunoglobulin G. So if the patient is infected, 1 week, from 1 week going, the incubation period is around 1 week, the virus starts replicating, and there needs to be a response. Where would the response come from? Definitely the response is going to be coming from where? The core antibody. But unfortunately, the core antibody, they are not the last killers. They are not designated to clear the hepatitis B surface antigen completely. So they can only clear to levels which are very low, they will clear the antigen, that's the hepatitis B surface antigen, to levels so low that they cannot be detectable on serology. And if we have hepatitis B surface antigen levels so low that they cannot be detectable on serology, then we'll call that the window period. So the window period simply refers to the hepatitis B surface antigens being low, such that they are undetectable on serology. And this job is done by the core antibodies. They are not designated to completely clear the hepatitis B surface antigen. They can only clear it to what? Low levels. And if you have that, then we call it the window period. Yes, so that's what we call the window period. So it tells you that the immunoglobulin G against hepatitis B surface antigen, that is the hepatitis B surface antibody, is the only it has the only right. They are the only, ownership, or the owners of the ability to clear hepatitis B surface antigen. And if they are not there, the hepatitis B surface antigen cannot be cleared completely. And it's only when the hepatitis B surface antigen is cleared completely that we can say that you are cured. But in this case, the case that we are talking about, the window period, you can see that the last killers, which is the hepatitis B surface antibody, they are negative, telling you that, okay, the infection is not cleared since we are having the core antibodies positive. And if you remember very well, we said that the moment the core antibodies are positive, it tells you that there has been an infection, whether currently or previously. Okay, so that is the understanding I want us to look at today about the hepatitis B serology. So we are going to look about 3 or 4 questions regarding the hepatitis B serology. I will give the question, then I will give the answers. Okay, so let's look at that. All right, so let's look at questions. So let's look at question 1. So I'm going to be giving questions. I'll pause for a few seconds to see you writing down your answers. Then later when I put the answer, then you can check whether you've gotten it right. And if you have any further questions, I'll be very pleased to answer you in the comment. Just leave them in the comment section. I'll be pleased to answer your questions. All right, let's look at the first one. So the first one, hepatitis B surface antigen negative. Hepatitis B. So in this case, immunoglobulin G can be represented differently. Immunoglobulin G against hepatitis B surface antigen negative, telling you that it's antibody against hepatitis B surface antigen. Another way this can be put is it can also be put as hepatitis B surface antibody, or it can also be put as anti-hepatitis B surface antigen. These are the several ways by which it can be put. So if you see me putting it in any form, you should understand, since we've already talked about that. Then, hepatitis anti-hepatitis B core antigen negative. So if you have this interpretation on hepatitis B serology, how are you going to, or if you have these findings on hepatitis B serology, how are you going to go about it? So let's look at that. Okay. I believe by now you have your answers. So now let's look at the solution. So the first thing you should know, hepatitis B surface antigen negative. It tells you that definitely no infection, no vaccination. That's what it tells you. Immunoglobulin G against hepatitis B surface antigen or hepatitis B surface antibody negative, telling you that definitely there is no cure. It's not cured, or no immunity. No immunity due to what? Due to previous infection. Then anti-hepatitis B core antigen, that is the hepatitis B core antibody, negative, meaning that this patient has never had hepatitis B infection. So if you bring that all together, you realize that this patient is clean. And if it's clean, then definitely he or she is at a risk of what? Acquiring hepatitis B infection. Therefore, our interpretation will be that the patient is susceptible, hence requires vaccination. All right, so as you can see, again, hepatitis B surface antigen negative, hepatitis B surface antibody negative. These are the various forms by which you can write it. Then hepatitis B core antibody, or another form that I put it, okay? That's anti-hepatitis B core antigen, or you can also put it in this way, immunoglobulin M against hepatitis B core antigen, or you can also say, as we've been saying, hepatitis B core antibody. These are the several ways by which you can write. And I took my time to explain for you each and every one. Hepatitis B surface antigen negative, telling you that there's no infection, patient has not been vaccinated. Hepatitis B surface antibody negative, meaning that the patient has not been cured, because we learned from the previous and our previous concept that hepatitis B surface antibody is the only sole proprietor, okay, which has the ability to clear hepatitis B surface antigen, leading to a cure. It's negative. Hepatitis B core antibody is also negative, meaning that the patient has never had hepatitis B infection before, has never had hepatitis B infection, telling you that this patient is clean. And how can we interpret that? Susceptible, hence requires vaccination as a prophylaxis against future hepatitis B viral infection. Please, I hope we've gotten the understanding to that question, and I hope you got the answer right as well. If you didn't get the answer correct, don't worry. We are going to look at an extra 3 of them to check whether you understand the concept or not. So let's look at the second 2. Hepatitis B surface antigen is positive. Immunoglobulin G against hepatitis B surface antigen is negative. Immunoglobulin M, or any of them, it could be G or M, or hepatitis B core antibody is positive. Then we can add the next one, hepatitis B escape antigen is positive. All right. You have the question in front of you. You have a few seconds. You can pause the video, solve it, then refer to the solution that I'm going to give. All right, so let's move on. Let's move ahead and look at the solutions. So hepatitis B surface antigen, positive, telling you that there are 2 connotations to that. Actively infected, that's the one. And the second one, you can think of what? Recent vaccination. But we don't know which one is which. So we have 2 deductions here, but we cannot conclude. Hepatitis B surface antibody, which can be written in these forms, negative, telling you that definitely not cured. Then you come to hepatitis B core antibody, which can be written in any of these forms. Let's say it's immunoglobulin M and not G. It's positive, telling you that I told you anytime hepatitis B core antibody is positive, it means that patient is having the hepatitis B infection, whether cured or current. So definitely the patient is what? And you should know, it's immunoglobulin M, telling you acute. So you are having acutely infected. Then hepatitis B escape antigen, positive. And we know that hepatitis B escape antigen is the marker for viral replication. So it means this patient is what? you have active viral replication ongoing. So if you bring this all together, then if you bring everything that we've interpreted together, then we can have a conclusion. Which conclusion can we have? It means that the patient, once this is, we say hepatitis B core antigen is positive. No, hepatitis B core antibody is positive. Then it means that recent vaccination, it is no longer a conclusion that we should be having. Rather, actively infected should be our what? Go-to. So in conclusion, we can say that this patient is having, we know immunoglobulin M was used here. So it tells you that he's having an acute hepatitis B infection, and it's highly infectious. Why are we saying highly infectious? Because of the hepatitis B escape antigen. Because of the hepatitis B escape antigen. That is why it is what? Highly infectious. I believe we've gotten this one too. If you still didn't get it, then we will look at the third one. All right, let's move on. Let's look at the third example. For the third example, hepatitis B, that's question number 3. Hepatitis B surface antigen, negative. Hepatitis B surface antibody, negative. Immunoglobulin M against hepatitis B core antigen, positive. The hepatitis B escape antigen, negative. So you can pause the video and write down your answer. Then later you can look at the conclusion we'll be arriving at. Now let's look at the answer to question number 3. Hepatitis B surface antigen, negative. We already know, meaning that in that case we can say that, okay, no infection. From only that, no vaccination. Only that. We are not saying we are concluding on that. Hepatitis B surface antibody, negative, meaning that not cured. Hepatitis B core antibody, positive. What did we say? We say that the moment it's positive, it tells you that the patient has had hepatitis B infection. So in this case, we'll say that yes, there is hepatitis B infection, definitely. And if you watch, it's immunoglobulin M, meaning that it's acute. But again, we cannot conclude that it's an acute hepatitis B infection. Why? Because hepatitis B surface antigen is negative. And why is it negative? It is negative because it cannot be detected on serology. And why can't it be detected on serology? There's only one conclusion, that the immunoglobulin M, which is of the hepatitis B core antibody, has cleared the hepatitis B surface antigen to levels so low that it cannot be detected on serology. Hence, hepatitis B surface antigen is what? Negative. So if it is like that, then we can conclusively say that this is what? The window period. This becomes the window period. Because again, hepatitis B escape antigen is negative, meaning that there is no active viral replication. And we said the window period is when the hepatitis B surface antigen levels are so low that it cannot be detectable on serology. And the only way that can happen is if the core antibodies are clearing them. But because it's not the sole right of the core antibodies to clear them, they can only clear to low levels, but not completely. It is only the hepatitis B surface antibody, that's immunoglobulin G, which can clear completely the hepatitis B surface antigen. If it is not hepatitis B surface antibody, then it cannot be cleared completely, and we cannot say that the patient is cured. So as you can see that hepatitis B surface antigen is negative, antibody negative, but core antibody positive, meaning that the core antibody tried to clear the hepatitis B surface antigen, but was unable to clear completely. Was only able to clear to levels undetectable by serology. So this we call the window period. I believe that you've gotten that one too correct. If you've done so, congratulations on your understanding and well done. Okay, let's move ahead and look at question 4. Question 4. So for the question 4, hepatitis B surface antigen negative. Hepatitis B surface antibody positive. Hepatitis B core antibody positive. Hepatitis B escape antigen negative. What would be your conclusion? Again, you can pause the video and write down your answers. Then look at the solution that we'll be presenting to you. All right, let's move ahead. So in this scenario, hepatitis B surface antigen negative, meaning that again, no infection, no vaccination. That's what it refers to. Hepatitis B surface antibody positive, telling you that what? Definitely immune due to previous infection or cured from previous infection, or another way we can see it is immune due to vaccination. Okay, but we don't know where to settle yet until we get down. Then we can see that the hepatitis B core antibody positive. The moment it's positive means that there has been what? An infection. So if there has been an infection, it tells you that immune due to vaccination is out. Then hepatitis B escape antigen negative, telling you that the virus is not currently replicating. So if that's the case, then we can conclude. Conclusion, we can conclude that this patient is immune due to what? Due to previous hepatitis B infection. Or, another way we can put it is cured from previous Hep B infection. Please, I hope we've gotten this as well. And if you've gotten it, clap for yourself. Well done. Okay, let's move to question 5. And that will be our last question for hepatitis B serology. For question 5, hepatitis B surface antigen negative, hepatitis B surface antibody negative, immunoglobulin M against hepatitis B core antigen negative. Okay, let's make the hepatitis B surface antibody positive. So this is the question. Question 5. Hepatitis B surface antigen negative. Hepatitis B surface antibody positive. Hepatitis B core antibody negative. Hepatitis B escape antigen negative. Again, you can pause the video and take a great shot at this because this is our last example. All right, let's look at the solution. So for the solution, hepatitis B surface antigen negative, telling you that no infection, that's what it's saying. No active infection. No active infection. And again, once it's negative, if you go one by one, it means no recent vaccination. That's what it's meaning. We cannot conclude on that. We cannot conclude on that until we look at the rest. This, positive, telling you that what? Definitely cured or immune. But we cannot be conclusive until we get down. Then you go to hepatitis B core antibody. It's negative. Once this is negative, it tells you that there has not been any infection. There has not been any infection. So in this case, this is out. Then we are having this. You come here, hepatitis B, escape antigen negative, no replication, no replication. So in this case, we can then conclude that this patient has not been infected, but is having hepatitis B surface antibody. And if you remember, we said hepatitis B surface antibody being positive can only be due to two things. Either cured due to previous infection or immune due to what? Vaccination. And we know once hepatitis B core antibody is negative, we only have the other alternative as the answer, which will be the vaccination. So we can say, conclusion, this patient is immune due to vaccination. Yes. All right. This particular one, I believe you've gotten it. Even if you don't get it, you can still roll back the video and watch from the beginning and try again. Don't worry, because with consistent exposure, it becomes easy. Thank you very much for your attention and tuning into Concept in Medicine. Make sure to subscribe, share, like, and comment. And if you have any question regarding this particular topic or concept that we just learned, kindly drop your questions in the comment box. Thank you very much once again, and it's a bye for now.